Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rogue Wave podcast, the frequency for all things pop culture and the disruptors behind it. We talk comics, movies, TV, and pop culture every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on Rogue Matter Podcast Network. That's facebook.com/Rogue Matter Podcasts and youtube.com/Rogue Matter. Download this podcast. Immediately follow the live stream on all major podcasting apps. Join the movement. Go Rogue. RogueMatter.com. I am your host, Michael Dolce, joined as always by the Lord of the Radio himself, Mr. Hassan Godwin. How you doing, sir?
Yeah, what's up? What's going on?
I'm imploring people out there that if they have kids or if they're thinking about having kids, reconsider that decision completely. That's essentially what I would like to tell people, because
trouble sleeping.
We just had we had they've been just trading ear infections back and forth. So it's like one kid gets better, the other kid gets sick. Really, it's very frustrating. And then we just finally got one kid back to camp, and then this morning my daughter wakes up with some sort of respiratory virus. It's not COVID. It's like RSV, they call it. It's very typical amongst little kids. So just don't do it. Just don't do it. That's all. That's my advice for the day. If you're thinking about starting a family, don't do it. We got plenty of people in the world.
It's been my philosophy for quite a while, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're reinforcing my ideology very well.
Yeah.
Very good.
Speaking of ideology, we're gonna put James Gunn's ideology to the test. We're gonna be talking Suicide Squad and our article we had last week, which I thought was pretty interesting. We've got the end of an era. We're going to spin the racks, talk about Wizard No More, and we're going to also discuss the move by a lot of creators right now to go to Substack. And I'm pretty psyched up about that whole like notion of new methods of distributing comics. But we're going to start.
Have to explain all that to me.
I will explain it to fans. I will explain it to everybody, and we'll gauge whether it's a good or bad thing. But we're going to start today. Like I said, we got Suicide Squad, baby. It is out. This one, I did not decide to watch it in theaters. I absolutely decided that.
Why is that? Why'd you do that?
Well, I got to tell you, I did not need to, I didn't feel the need in this particular film to brave going to theaters in the middle of an escalating, resurgence of,
all right,
of things.
Okay. That's kind of usually a taboo topic with you, I've found. It's not like I don't think you're not a COVID denier by any stretch of the imagination, but you're kind of like, like a lot of your
I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist when it comes to it. I think we pretty much define that, right? Like I'd say things aren't. Quite frankly, in New York, they're not bad at all.
Being afraid of getting sick is not the antithesis of optimism.
Oh, I'm not saying
that's
that.
not
I'm not
pessimism.
saying I was afraid of. No. Listen to what I'm saying. Generally, I'm an optimist when it comes to things. I'm going to say, hey, things will get better. Things will, and I do, and I honestly believe that. I honestly believe stuff I'm reading about the Delta variant also suggests. What happened in UK and India, it comes very fast and then leaves very fast. That would be great, So again, I tend to lean toward the optimism. That being said, Black Widow, no problem going to theater for.
I think your utilization of optimism is incorrect in this particular situation as a balm to what I'm trying to talk about, but I get what you're saying.
I'm saying in general what I tend to do is be optimistic about things. And now I'm segueing into why this particular movie didn't feel the need to even bother, right? Like I'm fully vaccinated, so I feel a level of protection. I went to a concert recently. I went to the Jets game recently, and I felt like worth the risk. Shang-Chi. I'm looking forward to Shang-Chi in September. I feel a level of protection with vaccination. Suicide Squad has nothing to do with levels of protection, but I sit there and go, at the end of the day, if something were to happen, because I went to go see The Suicide Squad in theaters, I'd be kind of pissed with myself. I could be kind of like, It's free on HBO Max. I have it. I'm not like a James Gunn. I like him, but there are people that are like, they kneel at the altar of James Gunn. And I think he's a really good filmmaker. But I'm sitting there going, I can stand. I don't need to rework my whole schedule. I don't need to take a day and inconvenience myself. I don't need to sit in a theater right now when things are going on out there to see this particular movie. It all came down to this particular movie. Jets game, open air stadium. Got to see my rookie quarterback not do very well. Totally worth it. Took my son out. It was a great day. Like it was totally cool. Suicide Squad. So that was my thinking in terms of not going to the theaters.
Okay. Gotcha.
Now,
all right.
Did I watch it going, boy, I wish I would have seen it in theaters? I think it would have been cool. I ended up watching it in three different sittings. But that's how I choose to watch movies when I'm at home anyway. I tend to, by the time I actually have time to sit and watch movies, it's usually very late at night after I've just been working all day. And I tend to be like, it's 10:30. I start falling asleep on things. Now, this movie, I actually didn't. This movie, I watched it right from the get-go. I thought it was, and this is spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen it yet, obviously. I thought it was actually pretty exciting. I thought it was pretty cool. I thought there was a lot to pull me in right off the bat. I thought the little red herring of having 800 cast members only to watch the majority of them perish.
Spoilers.
I said spoilers.
Yeah, but you're about to spoil a major aspect in the opening of the film. So
yes, to watch. Yeah. I mean, we're 7 minutes into the podcast now at this point, so I think people understand there's spoilers.
I'm just all right.
Okay,
never mind. Can't be too careful.
Fair enough. Oh, I didn't know you were gonna. Yes, we're gonna talk to watch the majority of the cast perish within the first 5 minutes of the movie in a very exciting way. I thought it was great. I thought the soundtrack was great. I enjoyed Idris Elba, be the ringleader of everything. Ratcatcher was great. King Shark was amazing. I loved John Cena's character. I thought John Cena and Idris Elba had better chemistry compared to, let's say, Falcon and Winter Soldier in terms of two characters that genuinely were competing against each other and competitive against each other. I thought it was great. I really did. I significantly enjoyed it. Now, aside from just enjoying it, part of me was watching it saying, this isn't redefining superhero movies. This isn't something that, and this is just based off the article we read last week and talked about, where James Gunn is saying, well, these things have to constantly adapt and evolve, or else superhero movies are going to go away. And he said, superhero movies to me are boring right now. And he kind of badmouthed the genre, which you pointed out was kind of odd, right? To have someone who's making superhero movies bash the actual genre they're in. Although it worked for Todd Phillips, right? I guess.
Well, it turns out it was also ill-advised,
Yeah.
Because now in hindsight, in retrospect of what became of his superhero movie, it's like, yeah, James, you might be right about that. Right?
That's the thing.
Because you didn't really offer anything all that different to the genre.
This was DC's Deadpool. This is what DC had been hoping for. And I'm not talking about DC like the creative engine of DC. I'm talking about like the Warner Brothers typical executives, like the caricature of like what a studio executive was probably thinking after Deadpool came out and they tried to tweak David Ayer's original cut and be like, can't you just be more like Deadpool? Can't it just be funny and then bloody and funny? And James Gunn's like, I'm going to tell you right now, I got this pitch. We're going to do the Suicide Squad.
And they offered him anything he wanted. And he decided to do a rehash of a movie that theoretically flopped just a few years ago.
Right.
Even though it made money.
Right.
And in retrospect, it made more money than a lot of the other Warner Brothers offerings. You know, it made a decent, respectable amount of money. It wasn't Wonder Woman or Aquaman, but it made a pretty decent amount of money for what it was. It just didn't have the trending reaction that everybody wanted. It didn't have the interactive presence that people have wanted. It didn't become a phenomenon. So, you know, he's going to redo it. Strange decision. It would have been. I mean, one would think once people give you the reins to do any kind of DC movie,
right,
you might not want to do a retread of a movie that just came out and then have the title be very similar. Yeah. Like, you know, like, I mean, it's tongue in cheek with Wolverine and the Wolverine, you know, and that kind of situation. But yeah, maybe it was a bad idea. Now, saying maybe it was a bad idea is a retrospective attitude to take once you find out what the results are. And now punditry like ourselves will come out of the woodwork going, yeah, he shouldn't have done that.
You're right.
He should have done this, you know, because as I had informed him when we had our meeting, James, baby, don't do that. Do this, because this would be way better for you, sir. Do not do that. But he didn't listen to me, and now he is paying the price for it. You know, that's how all of us try to sound.
Right.
I didn't have an opinion about it one way or the other. Like, hey, you want to do Suicide Squad again? If you think you could do it better than the other one, and you're James Gunn, go right ahead. So I'm not going to get on that bandwagon.
Right.
Because I've seen people doing that. It's like, why even make Suicide Squad all over again? So it's a dead franchise. All right, fine. I do think, though, and I've heard other people say this, I do think people may not respond well to vulgar entertainment, you know, to overly graphic violence and you know, and kind of mean-spirited comedy. It just might be that we are past that age where that kind of thing is. I mean, even Deadpool is a love story, you know, about a gross guy. I mean, it's not all the cruelty isn't the point of Deadpool,
right? And
I understand you're making a movie about villains who are forced to become superheroes, and part of the gag is that they don't do it. They do a very bad job of being superheroes because they're villains, you know. So, you know, they don't have the same standards. They don't have any morals. They don't have any self-conscious, qualms about, you know, murdering people in their sleep,
sure,
which we've seen them do in this film. Spoiler. So it's I don't know. I think it's kind of I don't know if it's a wake-up call for comic books movies in general, like James Gunn was saying, but I think it is a clarion call that you can't just throw anything at the screen.
Yeah.
You know, you got to be selective in the kind of stuff that you choose to depict.
What differentiates Marvel films from DC films when introducing characters that are not the flagship, instantly recognizable characters is that no matter what, you are basically watching a standalone film that is part of a larger story. So you are essentially getting another chapter, right? Captain Marvel is, I would wager prior to the Marvel Studios phenomenon, if you were to say who's Captain Marvel, the majority of people actually would have said Shazam, right? I think, and I'm just guessing, right? This is just my opinion. I'm not, you know, I have no data to back this up.
Yeah, but I mean, it's possible. It's a very feasible.
So to think that Captain Marvel, a film that doesn't have an instantly recognizable character, is going to make $1 billion at the box office and is going to become a phenomenon is not something that you would, I think, again, prior to the Marvel Studios phenomenon, you would ever have predicted. You wouldn't have predicted that even films like Black Panther, to where the comic book was not that successful monetarily wise and in terms of distribution wise, would be $1 billion franchise. Guardians of the Galaxy, which is what I'm leading toward, there is no way you would predict Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't think it made $1 billion, but I think it was up there like 900 million, something ridiculous for especially what the budget was and especially what the subject matter was, to where there is no way, again, there's just no way you would predict it. But that's the benefit of doing a Marvel movie, is that people understand the brand of Marvel Universe, they understand the brand of Marvel Studios, and
772 million.
What was it?
772 million.
Yeah, I mean that's, and I think what the budget for was,
2014.
Yeah,
yeah.
Was not as it was
not 770.
It was not even close to that,
72
right?
million, no.
So you would sit there and say, James Gunn has the audacity, in a good way, right? The ego in a good way, to say, I'm going to do for DC what I did for Marvel.
232 million was the budget.
Oof. That's a win.
772 million is the box office.
That's a win. That's a win for Marvel, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it is still, and we could probably discuss that also in the new age, in this new age. It is still a lot of money to throw. You're talking about a gain of maybe 500 million, or roughly around 500 million in that ballpark, 500 to 600 million.
Yeah.
But you've sunk 200 million into something. Now it's probably in this new wave of box office turmoil that we're going through. It's probably going to be that we're not going to be able to sink 200 million in a movie, like, even, because Guardians of the Galaxy, great movie, fantastic movie. It's not a big movie. It's not a tentpole movie, right? It was
not when it came out. No,
it's not. I mean, it's kind of, you can call it seminal, because it did usher in another level of certainty for the Marvel brand because of its success.
Yeah.
But it's not. It wasn't an Avengers movie. It's not on that level, right? You can see sinking $200-300 million into an Avengers movie like Endgame, right? But $200 million for what is theoretically a fledgling franchise,
right,
is a lot of money. You probably couldn't do that now, right?
Are you saying because of the uncertainty?
Yeah, because look, movies, regardless of the COVID situation, movies are not. A lot of movies, the market has shrunk. A lot of movie theaters are closed. That will never open again. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. Right. So like Endgame, like Avengers Endgame's 400 million, 356 to $400 million was the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Now they made $2 billion. And that's a tentpole movie. So like 230 million for Guardians of the Galaxy, and then an extra 100 million for Endgame. You're probably not going to be able to make that kind of gamble again in the way the market is now. Like you can spend that 200 million on your giant culmination movie. Right. That's going to make you $200 billion movie and be $200 billion and be the biggest movie in movie history, cinema history for the time being. But then you're like your next movie, like if you spend that kind of money on Doctor Strange, right after that, you're probably not going to be able to do that. Like the market won't bear that out anymore.
Well, again,
there's going to be a lot of rethinking and rejiggering of how these things go.
I think it also has a built-in excuse though in terms of the box office, because I know it only opened up to 26.5 million. Originally, they were tracking it at 70. Obviously, Delta variant I think has absolutely thrown a curveball, because the majority of people that were going to theaters were in the Midwest, and that's in the South, and that's where it's hit hardest. So obviously it definitely impacted the final score. I think everyone's going to get a mulligan personally in terms of the box office, but to your point of having to rethink
how long can you bear that out? Like, okay, yeah, this is not. It's not the fact that the market is hurt. It's the uncertainty of how long the market is going to be hurt, and will it ever be able to rebound? Because like I'm saying, if COVID disappeared next week and everything opens up again,
Mm-hmm.
we've lost a lot of theaters. We've lost a lot of market share,
Yeah.
So it's still going to be a diminished return from where we once were. So I'm just thinking I'm pretty sure.
So you're basically saying that you don't think
the accounting wizards out there are going to be like, look, if we want to make sure that we don't,
we're going to get 10 more Batman movies before we get like another.
If we don't want to file Chapter 11,
right?
We're going to have to rethink a lot of this business model. I think they already have to be doing that, regardless.
Well, ironically, what you're saying
though, of how.
Here's the irony, though. Warner Brothers literally just came to an agreement for theatrical release windows for 2022. So the HBO Max experiment, as we've seen it, will maybe temporarily, maybe permanently go back to the way it was.
Of course. I mean, it hasn't been working. It hasn't been a big success for them, regardless of how you look at it. It's been content for their HBO Max streaming service, which it's very difficult to get numbers on exactly how successful it is, but it is still considered "quote unquote" disappointing. It hasn't put them on the level, on the stratospheric level of Netflix and Disney Plus. So Disney Plus is the number 2 streaming service all of a sudden. You know, in a very short time of being around. Netflix had a decade on everybody else, and Disney Plus is right behind them. Okay, so of course we're not going to be doing day and date releases on HBO Max in the foreseeable future, right? And that's it's arguably a failure. Although I mean, it's hurt the box office, and it hasn't helped the streaming service to the extent that they wanted it to. So I get that. I'm not even talking about that. I'm pretty sure we're going to go back to, in theaters only, kind of a model, at least for the time being. There is a question though as to whether or not people are just burned out on the movie theaters. People have
movie theaters or comic book movies.
No, I'm movie theaters.
No, I'm just clarifying.
I know. It's movie theaters. I think the COVID thing has psychologically altered people's opinion on what is good entertainment that's worth leaving the house for.
Sure.
And it seems like movies might not be in their list of things that is worth leaving the house for.
Sure.
Worth taking in a dark room with a whole bunch of strangers. Now I love movies. I love going to the movie theater, especially with friends. So I don't want to see that end. Even if it becomes niche, whereas you get some kind of local theaters in your neighborhood and they show old movies and stuff like that. I mean, that would be preferable to having them all disappear 100%. But that's still not going to be the same. But I don't think that movies have done. I mean, they put comfy chairs in, but I don't think they've done much more to enhance the experience of going to cinema, as opposed to being able to sit in your living room. And you got HD TVs now that are like 80, 90-inch televisions that are, When I went to the last movie I went to see was with a friend, and we went to see Raiders of the Lost Ark because of the 40th anniversary. We went to see it in a downtown movie theater, and they put us in a tiny room with a movie screen that I could have probably bought, for $1,200 or something like that. I could have invested in. It wasn't that small, but it wasn't like seeing it in a mighty cinema. It wasn't like a grand outward experience. I had a ball. I was with my friend. We were watching movies with a whole bunch of other enthusiastic fans of the film. So that was its own experience, but it still wasn't like, opening day in 1981 going to see it in a giant movie theater. It wasn't that feeling, because they cordoned us off to the side because it was a niche market of re-releasing that film. So ultimately, I was with a friend. We went out, we saw the film, we went and got food after it. We made a day of it. It was great. But if I had watched that movie in my living room, it would have been roughly the same experience. Sans being out with a friend and having dinner.
Well, I mean, yeah.
And so they haven't.
It's not an apples to apples comparison, just because, again, it is a film that you've already seen.
I'm just talking about I'm saying in general, the theater doesn't do much to entice you to be there, other than show you movies that you can't see anywhere else. When you take away that exclusivity, the movies offer you very little.
Right.
When you go to a Broadway show, there's fanfare, there are intermissions, there's an ambiance to it. Everybody dresses up for it. It's an occasion. There's a majesty to it.
Right.
Now, doesn't mean that cinemas can't do that, but that the cinema was often regarded as the poor man's Broadway, right? Going to that, you just dress in your jeans or whatever. You don't have to dress up for it. I'm just going to take in a movie on the side. It's because of our lack of reverence for the occasion.
Right.
When the novelty of it has worn off and we can see these movies anywhere we want, what other method of enticing us to go to the theater have cinema attempted to do?
I think there's community experience. And I think we saw this before the Delta variant, amped up in the summertime. I think when people were starting to get vaccinated and there was a sense of we're going to move past COVID, people were very excited to get out of the house. And I think
get out of the house, but not necessarily to go to the cinema.
Yeah, but they were, things like Black Widow, they were definitely excited. A Quiet Place 2, they were definitely excited.
But those numbers were disappointing. So the Fast 9 numbers were disappointing.
Well, they were still. They're not pre-COVID numbers, of course. Understood.
But I'm saying, when Fast 9 and
Fast 9 was big.
When Fast 9 and Black Widow, no, but the numbers are disappointing. It's considered a disappointing box office.
Okay.
Right? And when Black Widow and Fast 9 were out, it was perceived that the bulk of the worst of COVID was over, because that was just before this Delta flare up, which presumably ran people back into the house for
absolutely
things like Suicide Squad and
sure.
A bunch of these other movies that came out. So all I'm saying is it would be terrible if we lost out on these things, but I don't think movies have done much to entice us to stay. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
And
so, one thing that James Gunn suggested that might be something to get people out of the house, and interested to get your take on this. Actually, wait, before we even get to that, what did you actually think of Suicide Squad?
I enjoyed it. It was not really my cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to call it this, but vulgar humor it's okay.
Right.
I get it. But and I can laugh at it. It just was all right, I think it's a batshit movie, and I think it was meant to be that way.
Yeah.
But I was fine with it on my sofa. I think if I had gone to the theater to see it, I would have been a little that was okay. That was, at least, now let's get some Chinese food. There's a difference. There are, varying degrees of opportunities when you're out and about going to see something than when you're sitting in your house to see it.
Yeah.
But
well, I definitely think I definitely think to one of his own points that he made, he said Jaws. He's never actually seen Jaws in the theater, and so he was talking about being on a streaming service, how movies and films live on, and he was fine with it being on the streaming service. Whereas other directors were very upset. The Scarlett Johansson lawsuit that just happened as well too, where that was kind of brought up, and he kind of said, no, look, I love being part of the streaming service. I love being part of something that people can grow to love my film. And I actually think this is a film that's exactly that, right? I think it's a film that I never at one point was bored. Like I said, I did end up watching it in 3 sittings because it was late, and I'm like, well, if I'm stay up another hour, it's not worth it. I can hit pause, I can watch it again the next day, and then so I watched it in pieces, which is my right because it's my streaming service. But it was a film that I sat there going, you know what? If this thing happened to be on TV, I'd end up watching. I mean, it won't be because it's extremely vulgar, but I'm just saying I would watch this if it was on. I could see this as being, there was enough bits and pieces to it. Again, like King Shark, was really funny, like bird, things like that, where he was very, humorous. The scene where they walk, John Cena and Idris Elba are competing with each other in terms of kills, and they end up wiping out the Freedom Force. I thought that was there was a lot of good setups, a lot of nice jokes, and I thought they landed. And so in general, I thought the film itself was enjoyable. Now, are they ever going to make another Suicide Squad film? No. It does have the unfortunate circumstance of having been released during the Delta variant now, to where I'm curious. I think originally it was tracking at 70 million, and they ended up lowering expectations due to just theaters in general and obviously public places, mask mandates now turning people off from coming, from going out as well too. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying these are all factors contributing into why people are not going to go,
right.
out and venture out.
Yeah.
So the Suicide Squad experiment, I think after 2 movies is probably over. However, James Gunn was asked, would they do a Justice League versus Suicide Squad movie? And he obviously said, I'd have to think about it. I haven't put any thought into a Justice League versus Suicide Squad movie, but it's not a bad idea. I think I got to figure out who the Justice League is first, because I have no clue. I'm here in the middle of DC. People are always asking me, is Henry Cavill still Superman? I don't know who Superman is. Who knows? And I think he kind of hits the nail on the head, right? For as many wins as DC has had recently with Wonder Woman, not Wonder Woman 2, with Wonder Woman, with Aquaman, with Shazam, you could call that a win in terms of critic appeal and just, what it made versus the budget. And I can even call this version of Suicide Squad a win just for the Suicide Squad franchise, because it's a much more watchable and enjoyable film than the original Suicide Squad was. We don't really have a sense of what the DC universe is. Everyone's clamoring for the Snyderverse to return. But meanwhile, I'm like, the Snyderverse is still here because this is Snyder's Aquaman. This is Snyder's Wonder Woman. This is the, Ben Affleck is still technically Batman until Robert Pattinson's Batman overtakes it. But even that is now not. It's an alternate universe Batman. So I just don't think they should ever do. I think DC needs to figure out what they are still before you could even.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't.
Like this.
I don't think this Suicide Squad situation is going to help them.
No,
because, they're notoriously skittish and changeable, right? Yeah. They don't stick to their guns.
Nope.
I mean, when the MCU had a Thor Dark World, or say there was a little dip in the enthusiasm for Age of Ultron, even though it was financially successful, or the Ant-Man movies, which were not monsters,
right?
They never course corrected. They were like, no, we're doing all this. These are episodes in an overall saga that's leading to a finale that we're investing a lot of time and energy and money into.
Yep.
DC has no plan. It's the same as the Star Wars sequel trilogy. It's like, we don't have a plan. And thus, when you are not dedicated to something and you don't have a plan for something, you are not invested. It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to get put off the path. It's easy to get discouraged because you don't have an overall picture of what this all could be in your mind that's helping you build it. So yeah, you can keep hiring visionaries like Gunn all you want from all over the spectrum and have them come in and do their own take on Joker and do their own take on this and that, but all it's going to do is continue to disjoint everything that you are, the overall
right,
the overall product that you're trying to put together.
Yep.
And like, okay, the Joker made $1 billion. That's a success, to any money person, that's a success. What it did do that also it's kind of confused the fan base.
Right.
They're like, well, all right, is this canon into the rest of the stuff? Or is this just a Joker movie? Or is this actually the real Joker?
Yeah. Or
is this a fake Joker who is taking up the Joker mantle because he's got face paint on? It didn't clarify anything.
Right.
It made a lot of money, but we are still as much in the dark as we were before they made it. When they suggested they were going to make it, we were like, why? What are you guys doing? So, all right, it is what it is. You're absolutely correct. They need a plan. They need to figure out exactly what the DCEU is, if there is a DCEU.
Right.
You know, or just come out and say these movies are not connected to anything.
Right.
You know, we're not after Disney's market. We are just making superhero movies because we own frickin' DC, and we're gonna make as many movies as we frickin' want to.
Yeah.
And we're gonna throw anything against the wall and see what sticks. And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But you know, every like I said, everybody's so skittish, and everything puts them off. You know, like so, $26 million in the box office on this opening weekend.
Mm-hmm.
You can guarantee there's not going to be any more Suicide Squad stuff. You know.
Yep.
But then again, if John Cena's Peacemaker television show does well on HBO Max, you'll get 10 seasons of that.
I know.
You know, they'll double down into it, even as the DCEU moves on. And creates a completely different universe that Peacemaker does not fit into. they will double down on all of it, just because that's where the money is. So who knows, man? I don't know. The upside to not being Marvel is that if any of these Marvel franchises fail, which we've been lucky none of them have so far, that will spell doom. You know, as far as the punditry is concerned, that'll spell doom for the entire universe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe there's safety in not doing it like that.
I
Who
agree.
knows?
What do you guys think? Do you think, would you want to see a Suicide Squad versus Justice League movie? What did you think of the actual film? Did it redefine anything? Did it do something different? Did you just enjoy it in general? Put it in the comments. We're on YouTube. We're on Facebook.
Giant starfish in it. I guess that's what it did differently.
That definitely was a little bit different. That was definitely a bit different. Let us know. Comment in the comment fields. When we come back, oh boy, an end of an era and the beginning of a new one. When we come back. Welcome back to the Rogue Wave podcast. We like to talk comics on this. Comics are the foundation for what you're going to see on the big and small screen. So this is our dive through the comic book industry. It is called Spinning the Racks.
Spin the rack, spin that rack.
It's been a while since we've heard that song. I missed it. I missed it, Hassan.
I bet you have.
You didn't miss it.
I've never missed it.
I
never miss any song. We have Spotify. We don't have to miss songs anymore. That's the age we live in.
Both good and bad. All right, we're entering a new age, one where comic book creators are moving their independent platforms to digital outlets. That's nothing new. It's been kind of happening with Comixology. Patreon was another one that came out, but now Substack is getting into more digital comics. James Tynion, Jonathan Hickman, Scott Snyder, and more launching comics on Substack. It was revealed yesterday that they will be publishing comics that subscribers can receive as newsletters or read on the Substack site. Tynion, who just won the Eisner Award for Best Comics Writer, announced that he turned down a 3-year exclusive contract with DC because he received a grant from Substack to create his own comics on that platform via his newsletter. Batman number 117 and the Joker number 14 will be his last issues on those comics. He said in a later post he doesn't rule out working on a limited run project for DC, and that DC versus Vampires, which he outlined, will launch in October with Matt Rosenberg as writer. He also indicated he will have cool stuff for retailers, and then he's developing additional projects that will be print first. The Substack comics will eventually be released in print, but he hasn't signed any contracts for that yet. So this is interesting, right? Because actually, wait. I'll tell you what his first comic book is going to be. It's called The Blue Book with artist Michael Avon Oeming, and he has 4 other projects in various stages of development. Substack subscribers will receive the comics in digital format only. So I subscribe to different writers on Substack. Substack is a journalist-centric website, but breaking into the digital comics, digital creative IP world is very interesting. Now, obviously, these are big-name guys. Anyone can sign up for Substack, but they're not going to get the same push that someone like you or I might get. Although we're middle ground guys, so I mean, who knows? We might. But if you're an up and coming person, you might not want to go to Substack, or Substack might not be of any interest to you. You might do Patreon, you might do different things. Where I love Substack, and where I think this is actually, I don't want to call it the future of comics. It's not the future of comics, but how this can be a legitimate channel is, unlike Patreon. The argument with Patreon is essentially competing with your Kickstarter dollars. Because Patreon is saying, okay, you come follow my page, and then you lop down X amount of dollars per month, and you're going to get X, Y, and Z from me. You still have to build up your Patreon following. And how you do that? How do you do that? You do that with your newsletter. You do that with your Facebook posts. Now, Substack kind of takes that middle man right out. I know that they have a website that you can go to, but the beauty of it is you can import your newsletter and build your newsletter directly through Substack. And so it combines two things that you would have to do in order to build an audience into one platform. That's number one. B, number two, like I said, I subscribe to some journalists and I get news. It's really convenient to just open up your inbox and get something new from a creative person. Yes, you do that with Patreon. But for some reason, it just doesn't feel... I think the level of ease and the level of just content delivery on Substack feels to me a lot easier and better. And it has the built-in subscribe buttons. Again, hey, you're getting this because you're a free subscriber. If you want to invest a little bit more, please click here. If you want to check this out, click here. It feels from a platform standpoint to just be a better delivery method. That just might be my own subjective reasoning, but I've gotten stuff from Patreon folks, and I just don't enjoy it as much as getting stuff from Substack. Now, again, I'm getting written text. I'm curious to, and again, I'm not signed up for these upper tier comic book creators just yet. Right now, I'm just getting their free newsletter and things. But I feel like the delivery of the newsletter is just cleaner. It's just everything about it is cleaner. I just got a newsletter from them, and it just feels cleaner than if I'm doing stuff through Patreon. So I'm excited to see where this goes, because I really do think, ironically enough, comics delivered right to your inbox is going to be the next big thing when it comes to comics.
Probably, just like movies delivered right to your television.
Right.
Comic books right to your inbox. Although I am hearing there's a little bit of a pushback. I don't know how long it's going to last. It's probably not going to be, it's probably like the vinyl people, who are still into vinyl while everybody else has got an MP3. But there's a lot of pushback. People like tangible comic books, but that's only going to just make something like this just going to increase the value of any tangible comic book that you have. But it doesn't mean that the format's going to change. It means that people are probably going to double down on it. Everything's going to be digital very soon.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think print has a home, just like look, vinyl records are bigger than they've ever been. They're bigger than the CD now. They're bigger than the cassette tape, which doesn't exist anymore.
Well, they're not bigger than they were when they were the only game in
town.
No,
of course not. Of course not. But okay. I'm saying in terms of...
Just clarifying.
Vinyl records were usurped by CDs, cassette tapes, which were then usurped by...
and then cassette tapes.
Yeah, which were then usurped by CDs. And then you flirted with different kinds of, CDs that could hold more information and whatnot. But that quickly got overtaken when Napster came out. There's always going to be an audience for print comics. I don't think that's ever going to stop. I enjoy the graphic novel experience. I enjoy getting the book, opening it up. I enjoy the single issues. I don't think older comic book issues remastered for digital has the same appeal. Like, don't bother reading the 90s comics that you might love or I might love. To me, I feel
well, I mean, when they're not digitally colored, they're not colored to the level of see
They're
that
very
you
flat.
get on a HD.
Extremely
screen.
flat. And so, to me, I think there will be a place for that. Kickstarter is that place. But the idea of getting new content delivered to my email box is actually pretty interesting. Now, email is a funny thing too, because that in many Gen Z circles and millennial circles is an archaic form of communication now.
Yeah.
But for this, I think it's perfect, isn't it? Like, isn't it perfect?
Yeah. Email's not going away though. It's not going to be replaced by Instagram or Instant Messenger or whatever. We've had AOL Instant Messenger since for 20 years, for over, almost. So, obviously email is passe and the kids don't love it, but it's a standard form of communication now through business. So I think the only thing that you're going to do is make emails faster or capable of holding more information so you can send more than just words efficiently. But it can only go up. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to go away.
Yeah.
People prefer email to talking on the phone nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a standard form of communication.
The other thing I find interesting about this is the idea that he would turn down the exclusive contract from DC, but he's now risen to the level of I am the brand, right? He is now the brand. People are reading DC comics to read his DC comics. But what I find fascinating is he is not doing what previous creators would do, and even Hickman did, right? Which is once you become the brand, you go to Image, right? You go to Image Comics.
Well, just not standard though. That's not required.
No. Again, nothing's required. I'm just saying what the trend would be. Okay, I've now built myself up to a point where I can be the brand, and now I go over to Image Comics. I read a great post from Liam Sharp, though, recently, who was, Death's Head 2 artist, is how I know him. He's been a comic book pro for a long time. He was talking about how, Kickstarter has now also changed the game in terms of being able to make a solid living. So it feels as if the transition is to these different delivery methods that are outside the mainstream big two for creators. We're not saying anything new or different, but what I think is interesting in the context of feature films these days, I just saw an article that was a friend of mine just passed over to me, said that Marvel pays you $5,000 as your royalty. It was a Screen Rant article. They pay you $5,000 if your stories get used in a movie, which, maybe to you and I is like, hey, $5,000, that's awesome. But you think about it in comparison
but if you
to the
create
billions.
a Taskmaster and they give you $5,000 and then the movie makes $1 billion, that hurts.
It hurts,
that
right?
Stings a little, yeah.
It hurts.
Absolutely.
The question I have for you, and it's something that I wrestle with on my end now, what incentive, aside from brand building, do people have to work at the big two? And an addendum to that, if they work at the big two, are we just going to get this? We're just going to get Magneto stories over and over again now. Like if someone goes on and does X-Men, we're just going to get Magneto stories. You're never going to get the next great X-Men villain. You're going to get Doc Ock over and over again. You're going to get Green Goblin over and over again. You're not even going to get, I feel like, an original take on a B level or C level character that exists in the library, because why would you bother? Like, why would you bother
creating a new villain? But I mean, what's the last new villain that's been created?
I'm looking back at the Grant Morrison run, was like Zorn, which turned out to be Magneto. I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm not a DC guy, so I really couldn't tell you. I can only tell you what's happening in Spider-Man and what's happening in X-Men.
We're strictly talking about the MCU, though, because those are the movies currently making the $1 billion. Well,
sure.
Used to be making the $1 billion. And
I mean, you had the Winter Soldier run in the 2000s, which is a great example.
We already discussed that Warner Brothers and DCU actually pays royalties or pays the creators handsomely, as opposed to the MCU. So we're strictly talking about that.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, look. we are. I think, and this is a hot take. I think we're past the creative stage and all this stuff. I think we're past the golden age and past the silver age of this stuff, and it's just content now. It's just fodder for other platforms and other forms of delivery, entertainment delivery system. But there are not a lot of big company innovations anymore. Yeah. You still got independent stuff. It's still driven by independence, but those guys get drowned out really easily. And on purpose. Yeah. The bigger fish come and eat the little ones, but they don't absorb them, they don't take them in, and they don't start, it's like independent publishing, novels, that kind of stuff. What will happen is you will get random, if your book is successful, you will get a random house or one of the bigger houses to come and solicit your book. Yeah. And then absorb you, just like indie labels for music used to be, where you start your own label and you do a couple of albums for your band, and you got modest sales and stuff like that, but you're trending in a good way. So Geffen Records comes along and says, "Hey, now you work for us." You get absorbed into the walled city. Right. So I think what's going to happen is these bigger comic book companies are going to have to start outsourcing the talent to other companies. They're going to have to start mining the independents. They're going to have to start mining Artist Alley for the next big thing, because their stock, their investment in their own archives, seems lackluster. Yeah. It's not like they don't seem to want to do much with their own stuff anymore as comic books. Yep. Or innovate in the medium, innovate the format of how we're getting our comic, even like round, like we're going to make comic books round from now on. I mean, we're not even getting dumb ideas like that, in recent
coming soon to Kickstarter. Round comics.
Round comics, yes. And you heard it here first. You see what I'm saying, right?
I do. I do. I'm excited for this. I'm excited for this from a creator standpoint too.
What, Round Comics?
No, not Round Comics. Substack in general. I'm actually pretty excited from this from Substack. What I think they should do, and I hope they do, is deliver a bunch of free stuff, because there's definitely to a point where the give ass model, works. I think better. I still wouldn't sight unseen pay for something, unless again it was fostered through a third party that said, hey, you got to check this out. I don't think I would just sit there and say, well, it's James Tynion, I'm going to love this book, because there's lots of creators that do independent books after coming from the big two, and I'm like, not my thing. So be interesting to see what happens. All right, moving along. This one's a sad one. Well, I guess it depends on who you ask.
Not really that sad.
Depends on who you ask. Fan Expo acquires Wizard World Conventions. This news dropped yesterday as well. So backstory obviously is Hassan and I both worked at Wizard. We both worked at it during its heyday. I think, what would you consider its heyday run was probably 95 to 2005, right? A 10-year run, I would say, was probably the heyday.
Probably that, yeah. So I was there for the second half of that.
Yeah, I was there from 02 to 06.
Yeah, you and I were there for the latter half.
Yeah.
Of their heyday.
I know they purchased Chicago Comic-Con in 95. And put on like 96 was like the first like Wizard World Chicago. Wizard,
and I wasn't there then.
Believe it or not, I mean, look, they redefined the comic convention experience. San Diego redefined it in a completely separate way in terms of marrying the Hollywood studios with the comic book world and the comic book fan. What Wizard was doing, and what Wizard World shows did when they first started expanding, which was like Wizard World Philadelphia back in 2002, they made comic book creators the rock stars. I mean, you used to go to these conventions because it was where the top talent all existed. Wizard World Texas is still one of my favorite shows we ever did. I ran a film festival there. Introduced me to a good friend of mine too, which we ended up collaborating on a comic book together. Texas was always my favorite to go. It was always my favorite place to go. Chicago, Wizard World Chicago in the heyday though, was always my favorite convention to go to. Because
I would say what more Wizard innovated was franchising conventions to the point where theoretically we could bring a San Diego to any town. We could bring a form of San Diego, a smaller offset or a smaller cousin of San Diego to your town. And in its home heyday of massive or multi conventions.
Yep.
That was one of the selling points is we're going to bring a convention to a place where you typically wouldn't be able to get to a convention. You'd have to travel very far to get to a convention. And
we're not talking about like those little hotel conventions either. I mean, theoretically speaking, there's always one of the small, ballroom shows everywhere. But it was, again, like you said, it was a grandiose affair. It was in a big convention center. It brought brought countless dealers and movie stars or expos and stuff like that to people who would have to travel quite a ways or quite a distance to get to a San Diego or a New York Comic-Con or a Wizard Chicago Comic-Con. So I think that's basically what they did. I mean, we didn't pioneer comic conventions by any stretch of the imagination. No,
but they did create a market for comic book convention expos, like or fan expo companies to come up into being, where their primary goal is just to put on shows as many places as possible and they keep expanding, and to kind of mirror the entertainment value of a giant con like, say, San Diego, to kind of put on the same level of pageantry that local conventions were not able to get to that level.
Yeah,
it is a form of cannibalism. It is a form of eating the bigger guy, eating the smaller guy. And I'm not oblivious to that at all, or destroying a mom and pop industry. And I'm not exonerating it, but I'm saying in its heyday it did invent the model, and it brought a lot of good stuff to places where good stuff could get to on a regular basis.
Yeah, no, I will miss it. I will miss it. I miss the nostalgia of it, because quite frankly, what Wizard World turned into later on, post collapse of the magazine, was a shell of its former self. I mean, we're not exaggerating, and we're not hurting anyone's feelings, because quite frankly, almost every single person that we worked with was unceremoniously dismissed from the company at some point. Even the founders. Right, even the founders were dismissed at some point. Take that for whatever it's worth.
In various forms of legalese and non-disclosure agreements and whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff happened that either we can't talk about or we're not privy to. But ultimately the simplified version is everybody got kicked out.
Yeah. Now, Jerry Milani was the PR guy there, and actually we owe him a big thank you, because a lot of people ask us prior to being on Rogue Wave, how'd you get all those interviews? Jerry always hooked us up with all the top level talent that Wizard World was attracting. So we want to give a shout out to him. I hope he transitions over into Fan Expo, and we'll find out if he does. But Fan Expo shows, I don't have too much experience with them. I went to Fan Expo Boston. It was okay. Nothing to write home about in terms of a convention. So hopefully they don't take what Wizard World has become and they harken back to what Wizard World used to be in terms of just a welcoming environment. Now, I would love to do Fan Expo Denver, which I never got a chance to do, because I'd love to visit the Pacific Northwest in general. I've never really been to many of those shows. Reed Pop does comic shows really well. I mean, New York Comic Con, it feels like you're at something big. C2E2, it feels like what Wizard World used to feel like.
Comic Con's almost too big.
Yeah.
It almost feels too big, because you can drown in there.
Emerald City, ECC, I'd love to get to that show. That's supposed to be a great show as well, too. And even though Reed bought it and kind of grew it, it's still supposedly a great show to go to. And I didn't want to do it because I didn't think I'd make the return on investment at the Wizard World shows, but I'd love to do Wizard World New Orleans. I mean, just because New Orleans in January, I think I could schlep out there. So maybe I'll make it out there for Fan Expo New Orleans at some point in the future when my kids get a little older, more self-sufficient, and stop getting sick all the time. That's my pledge. That's my pledge to you, Hassan. As we continue to grow, that's it right there.
Why? Am I going with you?
If you'd like.
You're pledging to me?
No expenses paid.
All right. No expenses paid. Yeah.
No expenses paid.
That's pretty much how it goes, no matter what.
Real quick, because we don't have enough time for this, but in its fullest extent, do you have a Wizard World memory that you?
I've got too many, and they would be long in the setup. But I mean, look, I'm just gonna say this word, and everyone from Wizard's gonna know. Knuckles.
Oh yeah, Knuckles is great.
Every fond memory either starts or ends with Knuckles. So, to make of that what you will, people who are not initiated.
Find me at a convention, and I will tell you many, many stories, including my very first show when I was an intern back in 2001, where a fellow intern went home crying. Another intern dragged me into the
I remember.
I wouldn't say the bowels because it was a very nice suburb of Joliet, Illinois, on the quest to somehow hook up with a volunteer that he had met there. And we were driving around the streets of Joliet, Illinois, for the eternal quest that is the opposite sex. I got plenty.
Weird. Always making it weird. Always making it weird. No,
it's not weird. It was an amazing it was an amazing story. I'm saying I can't tell you in detail how it all turned out, but I'm still here, and I think that guy was okay too. So, but I'm saying, like
I said,
find me at a bar, and we'll swap.
Yeah,
some Wizard World stories.
Legally, it'll probably be better for you if you do that in person instead of broadcasting on the air. Either way,
that's as delicate as I could put it. That's our show for tonight. Next week, what if the Rogue Wave podcast never existed? We'll dive into the new Marvel Studios animated show, What If?
Prophetic.
I'm sure there's some other stuff going on. We will see you guys next week.